The birth and development of communism. Communism is a political and economic system based on the principle of collective ownership of the means of production. It originated in the mid-19th century as an alternative to capitalism, and its philosophical foundations go back to the writings of Karl Marx. Communism has been embraced by many countries around the world, but it has also been heavily criticized for its lack of democracy and human rights abuses. In this article, we'll explore the origins and philosophical foundations of communism and examine how it has evolved over time. Part 1: How the ideas of communism spread across Europe and led to the American Revolution. The ideas of communism, originating from Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, who co-wrote the Communist Manifesto in 1848, had a profound impact on the history of Europe. The spread of these ideas across the continent in the late 19th century resulted in a wave of revolutionary activity that eventually led to the Russian Revolution in 1917. This revolution marked an important milestone in European history and served as a catalyst for further development. Political and social. The manifesto was a key point in establishing the conceptual foundations for the modern communist movement. His main arguments were based on criticism of capitalism and its exploitation of workers. They also defended the need for a fairer economic system based on sharing resources among all citizens without legal distinctions or rationalizations that prevent said economic equality among all of them. Second part: the rise of Stalinism and its impact on international relations during the Cold War. The rise of Stalinism during the Cold War had a profound effect on international relations. He created a division between the capitalist West and the communist East. Ideological differences between the two sides led to an arms race, proxy wars, and other forms of conflict. Communism would not remain a viable ideology for long after the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. As the country collapsed, tensions between the West and East eased and they began to cooperate in international relations. The Cold War had very little effect on international relations during this period due to the continued cooperation between East and West after World War II. There was no rivalry or hostility between the two parties due to this cooperation. Third part: the birth of the Soviet Union as the first communist state. In 1848 in Europe, all the powerful, the Pope in Rome, the Tsar of Russia, and the various rulers of Central Europe, fear a new movement, communism. Although up to now it has not been officially consolidated, this new movement is recognized by all of them as a new power and a danger. It is, therefore, time to present the world with a communist manifesto to put an end to the spread tales of ghosts and lies and make public the true intentions of the communists. The Communist Manifesto had a major impact on modern history, as it helped foster the rise of the Soviet Union as the first communist state. This new form of government was based on the principles of Marxism-Leninism, the Marxism adapted by Lenin, and followed a planned economic model known as a centrally planned economy. From 1917 until its fall in 1991, the Soviet Union was seen by many communists and socialists around the world as an exemplary model of successful socialism. Part 4: the development of communism through the Chinese Revolution and the Cuban Revolution. The legacy of the Communist Manifesto was particularly visible in the Chinese Cultural Revolution, 1966 to 1976, under Mao Zedong, likewise in the Cuban Revolution led by Fidel Castro that led to the triumph of a planned economy and a long communist and socialist presence throughout the Caribbean for decades to come. Official relations between China and Cuba date from a date as close to the beginning of the Cuban Revolution as September 28, 1960. In those days, in the largest of the Antilles, Commander-in-Chief Fidel Castro, during the first declaration of Havana, announced the decision to cease ties with Taiwan and to establish them with the government of the People's Republic of China, as the sole and legitimate representative of its people. In addition, later, he defended in New York the right of China and its government to be represented in the United Nations. At that time, Cuba advocated for the restoration of China's legitimate rights in the United Nations Organization, an issue that materialized in 1971. This last event marked the international relations system of the time and transcended to the current international context in that the presence of China contributes to multilateralism, balance, and stability. That is why Cuba is honored to have been the first Latin American country to take this transcendental step, and not only because it constituted a manifestation of independence from Cuban foreign policy, but also because it was an act of historical justice. Part 5: The Impact of Communism on Modern History. After the end of World War II, the world communist movement faced a new script. Socialism reached its political zenith in the late 20th century in the communist bloc of Europe, the Soviet Union, communist states in Asia, and the Caribbean. The foreign relations of the Soviet Union had changed. From being an international pariah, the Soviet Union was credited with defeating Germany. Informally, the Western states recognized the dominance of the Soviet Union in their neighboring countries, while the Soviet Union did not actively encourage revolution in the capitalist countries, which, led by the United States, opposed the spread of communism on a global scale. Thus began a period of distancing between the powers known as the Cold War. By the 1920s, communism and social democracy had become the two dominant political trends within the international socialist movement, with socialism itself becoming the most influential secular movement of the 20th century. Communism as a historical experience inspired by Marxist ideals occurred in the so-called Russian Revolution. The October Revolution of 1917 was the founding event of communism in the 20th century. It was characterized by the total concentration of power in the Communist Party, which began as a revolutionary movement, but became a system of state power. Even in 1918 it changed its nomenclature from Social Democrat to Communist. Soviet communism industrialized and modernized Russia, turning it into a superpower with an important geopolitical role, but the human cost of this process was very high. With its bellicose power, its universalist logic, and its victory over Nazism, the Soviet Union supported the establishment of communist governments in other countries of Eastern Europe, Asia, and Latin America, especially after World War II. Communism weakened in the 1980s, and the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 was the fundamental milestone in discrediting this model as an alternative to liberal capitalism. Countries that joined the Soviet Union withdrew from the bloc, and the USSR dissolved in 1991. This is the end of this video, friends. I hope you like it. Do not forget to subscribe and activate the bell so that you know when I contribute new videos in following the story.